Welcome to this side event, which is looking at multi-stakeholder priorities on crimes that affect the environment. My name is Ian Tennant. I'm chair of the Alliance of NGOs for Crime Prevention and Justice, director of Multilateral Global Mission Against Crime. I would like to thank all of the co-organisers for today's event: Instituto Igarapé, Brazil, France, Peru, Wildlife Conservation Society, the Wildlife Justice Commission, Environmental Investigation Agency, UK, International Council of Environmental Law, Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime, and the Alliance of NGOs. Thank you very much to everybody. We will go very quickly into the presentations because we have a lot of speakers today, but just very briefly to say this is an opportunity to take stock of the most important and concrete opportunities for progress in the multilateral response to crimes that affect the environment. This is something that all of us on the panel today are very interested in achieving for different but complementary reasons. The panel was designed to reach across different sectors, to outline the different needs and priorities for different sectors and different countries, and how a new protocol will address those needs. In particular, we'll present the legal, operational, and political priorities for a possible protocol to the UNTOC on crimes that affect the environment. We will facilitate an exchange of views among member states, practitioners, and experts, and we will look ahead to the opportunities coming up, including Crime Congress and the UNTOC Conference of Parties, and identify and address questions and concerns, recommendations made during the UNTOC Intergovernmental Expert Group. So first, I'm going to, thank you very much, hand over to one of our event sponsors. I'm very happy to include here next to me Ambassador Marcelo de la Nina, General Coordinator for the Fight Against Transnational Crime, Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Brazil. So, yes. Marcelo, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Ian. Let me first of all thank UNTOC for organizing this event today. That gives us yet another opportunity to talk about the idea of launching negotiations on a new protocol on environmental crimes. As you know, Brazil has been very engaged in this endeavor for quite a while, I think. And our main goal is to achieve the launching of negotiations at the next COP of the UNTOC later this year in October, yes. Let me say quickly, I don't want to take too much time here, but let me just say that what we are now proposing is the negotiation of one single protocol that would encompass 4 different modalities of whatever you can consider an environmental crime. And those modalities would be trafficking of wildlife, trafficking of illegal mining, trafficking of waste. So this is the main goal and the main modalities of crime that the modalities that we are targeting. And that we have already been discussing within the coalition that was established last year. We have already been discussing on a draft resolution to be submitted at the next COP. So this is well advanced. And basically, let me just conclude by saying that, first of all, I think that the NGOs have been tremendously engaged in this effort. I have to thank every single NGO in this that has engaged in this effort together with us. But unfortunately, I have to ask you all to continue engaged and actually to do even more, because I think our assessment in Brazil is that we have made progress, but we are still in the middle of the way. Right now, if this decision would have to come to a vote later in October, it's unclear whether we would have the votes necessary to have this resolution approved. So we need to do more. We need to engage more. In our coalition, in terms of countries, we have countries from all continents of the world, but the coalition is underrepresented both in Europe and in Asia. And I also consider that in Africa we could achieve more. So that's what we need to do. We, of course, will remain very, very engaged and at your entire disposal if you want to further discuss what to do and how to do what we have to do. To conclude, once again, thank you all. Thank you very much for all the support. And thanks again for UNTOC for organizing this meeting and giving us an opportunity to discuss this important stuff. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcelo, for that. And I have to correct one thing, although I'm very grateful for you thanking UNTOC. It's actually a group effort of NGOs, including the Alliance, but also tabled for Americans. I mean, I'll take it. It's actually tabled by Instituto Intergovernmental, a very prominent Brazilian NGO. So I will now hand over for our clerk to begin the panel with Laura Weisbich, Deputy Director of Research from the Instituto Intergovernmental.
Thank you so much, Ian.
Easier
Thank
to
you,
share it.
Marcelo, and it's really a pleasure on behalf
Yeah,
of
lines.
Instituto Igarapé Institute. It's a pleasure to co-host the side event alongside a number of committed governments and civil society organizations on the issue of crimes that affect the environment. Igarapé, for those who don't know us, we are a Brazil-based think and do tank working on environmental crime in the Amazon basin. So my quick intervention is going to take this positionality, this thinking and working around the Amazon basin, and try to convince you here in the room that this is something, a new protocol, something that matters for us all, not only in the Amazon basin, but beyond. So back to the Amazon basin. The Amazon is the largest rainforest in the world, spanning across 9 countries and territories in South America. And it faces today a series of interrelated security and environmental challenges. Both deforestation and homicide rates are out of control. They are high across the region, in every single Amazon region, across these countries and territories, while human development remains lower than other areas in these countries. This is not a coincidence. For over 7 years, the Igarapé Institute has been working on what we call the nexus between forest loss and environmental degradation and multidimensional insecurity in the region. In our research, we map and analyze the scope and scale of what we call, again, the ecosystem of environmental crime. What we mean by ecosystem of environmental crime? It's the convergence between a series of environmental offenses and non-environmental offenses that fuel both the destruction of the forest and crucial ecosystems like the Amazon, and enable other criminal activities, including transnational organized crime. And this is the very subject of this whole week. Indeed, our research shows that transnational organized crime is central to the functioning of these illicit markets in forest areas across the Amazon, including illegal gold mining, illegal logging, land grabbing. They also engage, while engaging in illicit forest markets, they also engage in economic diversification. So these transnational organized networks are playing both a role in fueling environmental crime, but also in sustaining other illicit criminal markets, including drug and human trafficking, just to name a few. South America faces, as we all know here, huge challenges in terms of transnational drug trafficking. This is not a novelty yet. In the last decade, the Amazon region became also a site for both rethinking and rerouting these transnational drug-related routes, but also a site for excessive violence above national average across the region. So environmental crime, as many experts would say, has become that kind of threat multiplier. Alone, environmental crime is not responding for all that violence, but it really enhances and multiplies the trends. This is precisely why we need more international legal frameworks that can expand the toolbox. Governments and law enforcement institutions have to address the complex pressing issue. And I'm going to repeat this because I think it's important. It's about expanding the toolbox. It's not about replacing every single other tool that governments and law enforcement have, but it's about giving yet another robust tool that governments and law enforcement institutions can use. So let me focus on one particular example where I think this kind of expansion makes a lot of sense. And the example here, or the sector here, is illicit financial flows. This is where a protocol, a new protocol, would add value to ongoing efforts. And what's that the case? As we know, environmental crime is a very lucrative crime. And as I already stated, environmental crime is progressively converging with other illicit markets. And in that sense, it's also a site for laundering proceeds from other criminal economies. So the governments in the Amazon basin where we work are increasingly aware of that kind of systemic dimension of the problem, but they are poorly equipped to tackle them. And one major challenge is the very variation across national legislation, which really hinders cooperation. In the case of money laundering or illicit financial flows, many countries, including in the region, still do not consider environmental offenses as predicate offense for money laundering. But beyond the kind of financial cooperation, there is also room for technical cooperation, information sharing, cross-border operations. And that's yet another value of a multilateral instrument like a new protocol. For those who are familiar with critical ecosystems like the Amazon basin, this is very clear. What is the added value of another legal framework at the multilateral level? And again, let me conclude by saying and reiterating how important this is as a complementary tool. Governments in the region are already working nationally. They are already slowly but significantly increasing regional cooperation. What we need now is this extra layer, is this extra incentive, both in legal terms and practical terms, for multilateral cooperation. And this is what a new protocol can give countries in the region. Again, a new protocol alone would not solve the problem. But let me end with this full conviction that time has come for this legal advancement to come into fruition. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Lara, for spelling out what it means for your region and beyond to have this opportunity of a new protocol. We're now going to an online speaker, to Mr. Jean-Charles Gontier from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of France, the Terrorism and Organised Crime Department. France has been leading in terms of the European context, the push for more action through the multilateral system on crimes that affect the environment. So I'm very happy that Jean-Charles is with us today. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Yann. Thank you for calling me for this meeting. Hello, everyone. First, I would like to thank the civil society for organizing this meeting. Thank you, UNTOC, WCS, Iguarape Institute. It's very interesting for us to be here today. And France welcomes this meeting, which is taking place at a pivotal moment for the multilateral agenda on environmental crime. Just after the meetings of the Intergovernmental Group of Experts, whose share summary we are waiting, and the United Nations Congress of Crime that will take place in September, and not to mention the UNTOC COP in October. So the coming months will be crucial, and France intends to play a role in this process, and it has done, as it has done for several years on this issue. So we think that the Intergovernmental Group of Experts reach a widely shared diagnosis. The current international legal framework has structural shortcomings. Existing sectoral instruments such as CITES or the Basel Convention are not tools for criminal justice. As for UNTOC, which remains for us a key instrument for international criminal cooperation against organized crime, its application to crimes that affect the environment is far from perfect, in fact. So from our point of view, we have noted deficiencies, the lack of common definition. This is something very obvious, and this is one of the main conclusions of the group of experts. The heterogeneity of the national legal frameworks, the limitation of the principle of dual criminality. We also have the uneven implementation of existing instruments such as financial investigations tools, seizure and confiscation mechanism, special investigative techniques. All of these aspects are not well executed by the states. We also know that we also have a lack of consideration for certain types of crimes, such as, for example, trafficking, waste trafficking, illegal mining, or marine crimes, for example. So we also have some issues about the sanctions, restoration of habitats, repatriation of specimens, or again, the reparation of environmental damages. So this observation of ineffectiveness is now well documented. In fact, we have the work done by the group of experts. We also have the work conducted within the UNODC. We have a global analysis. We also have a legal analysis on the international framework. And so we also have the work done by and carried out by the NGOs, which is very, very interesting. I have another aspect to mention. It's the fact that no state within the group of experts has disputed the existence of GASPs. So that was very interesting to know that. And no states has disputed the perfectibility of the application of the UNTOC. So faced with these shortcomings, we defend a clear position. First, the UNTOC must remain the reference of framework from our point of view. It will be counterproductive to create a parallel convention outside of this framework. The Palermo Convention offers a proven structure. The three existing protocols on trafficking in human beings, smuggling of migrants, and firearms has demonstrated their effectiveness. And we think that a fourth protocol dedicated to the crimes affecting the environment would follow the same logic. Secondly, we advocate a comprehensive approach, and this means a single protocol covering all forms of environmental crime. So we have some examples in Europe here. We have a directive, a European directive. We also have a convention within the Council of Europe. So it shows that it's possible to create some international framework on this aspect. So from our point of view, yes, we think that such a protocol will allow for the concrete activation of existing cooperation tools. What we want to have in this protocol, it's, for example, harmonization of criminal offenses, classification of crimes affecting the environment as serious offenses under the UNTOC Convention, the development of financial investigation based on follow the money. We also want to have mention about special investigation techniques, but a new protocol would also pave the way for new provisions, we think. The use of new technologies, I think it's important. It's not in the three former protocols, but I think it could be interesting to have that, to strengthen sanctions, to talk about ecosystem restoration, and to also have aspect about border controls. And I think that a new protocol would send a strong political signal from the international community against transnational organized crime. So France is taking a position that is both ambitious and realistic. So ambitious, we believe that the status quo is not satisfactory. So leaving the current framework unchanged means giving up effectively combating rampant crime and sending signal of resignation that will weaken the entire multilateral criminal justice system. And so realistically, we know that opening formal negotiation on an additional protocol requires sufficient political support. So this support is growing globally. We saw that during the group of experts. It's quite interesting for that, but it remains difficult to assess whether a majority of states are ready to engage at the next COP. So we are convinced that this negotiation and the next negotiation of a new protocol must be conducted with in a precise, measured, and constructive and inclusive manner. So, so we advocate for a gradual and inclusive approach based on the dialogue, consensus, building, and persuasive efforts with partners who are still hesitant. So in the lead up of the UNTOC COP in October 2026, we have two main actions. It's first to maintain the level of ambition. So crimes that affect the environment must remain at the forefront of the Vienna agenda. So this means that we need to make efforts for the crimes of Congress and the COP UNTOC. And second, to consolidate convergences. So a growing number of states are recognized the need to strengthen the international framework. These states must be mobilized, and so this is what we want to do in France. So and political interest transform into a structured action while respecting the imperative of consensus. So we are still fully committed, and we support force protocol, but also intend to work toward broadening the consensus on this issue. And we wish to continue the dialogue and raise awareness and remain a proactive force in this area. So we are ready to work with all our partners on that. And this is what I have to say about France's position on this topic. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jean-Charles, for setting out France's positioning and thinking as we lead into the UNTOC COP later in the year. We're now going to move to another online speaker who brings experience from past relevant negotiations. Kimberly Prost, a member of the WJC Independent Review Panel and a former negotiator in the UNTOC negotiations in the delegation of Canada. Kimberly Prost, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure to be with you all today in my former location, Vienna. As mentioned, many speakers are talking about the present circumstances. I'm going to take you to the past. I'm going to draw from the experience of participating in these negotiations many years ago now to remind of the mission and the objective of the Transnational Organized Crime Convention and its protocols, and to try and address and respond to some of the concerns that have been expressed about this important proposed new protocol. And I have 3 points I want to make. First, I want to address, it's already been mentioned, this concern about this being unnecessary and being duplicative in some way of other conventions or treaties which may apply to environmental crime. Now, I have not studied what other conventions and treaties, how they intersect or apply, but I can say with absolute and complete confidence that this simply is not an issue because the TOC Convention and its protocols was a watershed agreement, a unique treaty which accords powerful tools that are not replicated by any other treaty or convention. We, the negotiators, knew this from the beginning, that we were forging new territory, not to address a specific type of crime, but to address the phenomena of organized crime. Organized criminal groups perpetrating a whole range of different offenses and operating very effectively cross-border. That was the purpose and remains the purpose of the convention, and it determined its design, its special design. So it has only the 4 obligations to create particular crimes, but they are the crimes that are common to all organized crime groups around the globe, wherever they operate. Membership in a criminal organization, money laundering measures, corruption, and obstruction of justice. Secondly, the convention had to grapple with, this is one of the hardest issues, how do we address the different forms of crime that are carried out by organized criminal groups? And it was solved with 2-pronged solution. One was, of course, applying it to serious offenses which are defined by penalty, a simple way to incorporate the variations that cut across countries and regions. But really importantly, the second solution was the protocols, which were designed to be able to address specific types of crimes that in different times, different eras will arise and will become a real threat in terms of organized criminal groups. And you need a protocol to bring attention to them and also, as has already been mentioned, to adjust special tools that might be necessary for those particular types of crimes. And this was meant, importantly, to be a living process. This was meant to add protocols to address modern threats just as the criminals add crimes to their repertoire. And finally, and most importantly, what the convention brings, it's already been referenced, as these powerful tools, in particular, a comprehensive tool for international cooperation to address transnational crime, which includes extradition, mutual assistance, law enforcement cooperation, and all the other related tools, as well as asset forfeiture. So whatever other agreements may exist, the TOC stands alone as the one that can effectively empower states to combat the real threats from environmental crime by organized criminal groups. Second concern, sovereignty. There seems to be some sense that the negotiation of this protocol in and of itself would in some way impose obligations with respect to environmental crime. And this is simply not the case. Whatever the negotiations result, whatever the protocol that could be created, there is no automatic application. Of course, every state will remain sovereign to make the sovereign decision to apply it or not. And even more importantly, were you a state to join the protocol itself, it has all the protections of the convention. This convention was negotiated in 1998. It was revolutionary. There was rampant fear about sovereignty infringement, so the convention is peppered with protections for discretion and for the protection of sovereignty. But most importantly, when you talk about the protocols, it's important to remember the history and the intent. The 3 protocols that have been mentioned at the time didn't have universal support. They didn't necessarily have universal interest, but they were seen as being supported by a sufficient number of countries to pose a sufficiently important threat and manifestation of organized crime to justify a protocol. And the spirit was, the adoption of the protocol does not compel any state to take action against this genre of crime, but it recognizes that many states desperately need and wish to do so, and it provides international guidance on how it can best be countered. And so, and may I say, it's clear from the choices that were made back then, many years ago, that we are pretty good at identifying when crime is justified in terms of a protocol, and I think that's the case with this one. And lastly, definition. There are very valid concerns, of course, about a definition that doesn't overreach and safeguards other important state interests in the full context. But again, that's not a reason to oppose this protocol. If anything, it's a reason for this protocol. Right now, as has already been mentioned, without international action, there is the application of the convention to some environmental crimes, albeit not consistently and not sufficiently. So avoiding the protocol isn't going to block coverage of environmental crime. But the protection and the advantage of the protocol is it will give an opportunity for open discussion and debate and consensus building among states as to what that definition should be. And individual states will be able to contribute to that discussion, which might not only affect what is developed internationally for the protocol, but national thinking on the definitions. And most importantly, I return again to the spirit, which is even if this is not a protocol your state will adopt, it will contribute to the joint effort against, and in accordance with the mission of the TOC, against a common enemy, organized crime and criminals. And importantly, the protocol will not only serve for international cooperation, but it will be invaluable as an instrument for states to use nationally to develop practices, policies, and legislation, especially states that struggle with limited resources to do so. So to conclude, I can only hope that these brief remarks can help persuade that the time is right, and this proposed protocol fits perfectly with the purpose, aim, and spirit of the Transnational Organized Crime Convention and its protocols, and would be a welcome addition to the fight against organized crime. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Kimberly, for that powerful intervention, which really gives us important context for why this is a discussion we're having now and why it's relevant and comparable with the situation that you've described. Our next online speaker is going to be Daniel Bruve, Senior State Advocate, the National Prosecuting Authority of South Africa. Over to you, advocates. You're muted at the moment, so you'll need to unmute.
I apologize. Good afternoon, dear distinguished delegates and attendees. Thank you for availing South Africa of the opportunity to address you and for the conveners of this meeting. So South Africa has particular challenges in addressing transnational organized crime linked to the crimes that affect the environment. We have found that we have engaged countries in pertaining to joint operations and control deliveries, which was declined. We have engaged countries through MLA processes in regard to money laundering, fraud and customs and excise offences that is linked to environmental crime, which has been unsuccessful. We have been approached by 3 countries in the last 5 years that requested South Africa to render mutual legal assistance, although our species has been trafficked for years in quite significant numbers. We have also then realized that the reliance placed on money laundering is misplaced because a lot of countries require that the proceeds should be linked to predicate offences rather than unlawful activities, and therefore the money laundering offence could not be used as a basis for a mutual legal assistance. Similar in regard to fraud, customs and excise contraventions, the assistance was not rendered because once these species reaches foreign borders where the species are not indigenous, they become legal consignment irrespective of their illegal origins. We've also learned that CITES is not assisting where consignments are trafficked or smuggled through the black market, and most concerning, the fact that foreign countries are not addressing traffickers and couriers that drive the poaching in their countries. Thus, the efforts that South Africa are doing are nullified as the demand and market remains operational. So, whilst the previous speaker looked at the past, South Africa wants to look at the future as to how can a protocol address the serious legal gaps that hinder international efforts to effectively deal with crimes against the environment as a transnational organized crime. We have heard from previous speakers in regard to the fact that there is no uniform definition for what constitute these crimes in the international legal framework. So, crimes against the environment is currently in the same position as the trafficking in persons was before a protocol has been adopted. The countries defined human trafficking differently in the past or not at all, and it wasn't recognized as a serious crime in some of the UNTOC jurisdictions. So how would a protocol assist crimes against the environment? We will have created a global agreed legal definition leading to certainty and consistency, create clarity regarding the scope of these crimes, and close the loopholes that leaves it up to parties to decide what falls within the scope or not. The single definition concerns raised can be addressed by defining key concepts and conduct similar as to the tip and firearms protocol. It would provide legal certainty and uniformity, what countries and state parties should criminalize, and more importantly, it would recognize these crimes as transnational organized crime being committed by an organized criminal group. We have also heard the challenges with criminalization and dual criminality, and looking forward, a protocol will allow for criminalizing specific conduct rather than relying on serious crime threshold, as similar to the TIPS and the firearms protocol. It will overcome inconsistencies in domestic national laws for international cooperation that prevent states from narrowing the scope of criminalization and create standalone obligations to criminalize the conduct. International cooperation will be possible even where penalties are low. It will recognize again crimes against the environment as transnational organized crime regardless of the domestic penalties, and it will address the whole range of these crimes, including of the derivatives. It will bring CITES and non-CITES listed species within the ambit of UNTOC and can include these crimes that is protected under national laws that will alleviate the challenges with dual criminality that we are currently experiencing. There is additional positives. It will address the gaps in the international legal framework. The protocol can bring the treaties into the ambit of a protocol. It can transform them from regulatory frameworks into enforceable criminal law instruments, and criminalization of violation by states parties as appropriate can also be addressed. It can increase the effectiveness of the import, export, transit, and controls and create consistency across borders and strengthen borders controls to prevent and detect this conduct, which is also similar to the firearms protocol. It will bring crimes against the environment into the scope of UNTOC, irrespective if they are domestically considered as serious crimes, and notably will be the first international instrument to bring trafficking of fish and timber species into the ambit of UNTOC. It will introduce a permit and licensing regime for all these species, and it can be based on domestically issued permits as well as CITES. It will create offences for the falsifying, altering of any document required for import, export, and transport, and it can also be deemed as extraditable offences between parties. It can establish a mechanism to establish a shared database of national protected species or precious metals, and it will establish sharing of scientific and technological information and forensic samples, and obviously it will enhance the traceability of species and the trafficking of precious metals. In conclusion, South Africa views the establishment of an additional protocol under UNTOC as a unique opportunity to secure meaningful international cooperation in addressing these crimes, an area not adequately covered by existing instruments. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving us the South African perspective, advocates. We really appreciate that. And now we will move on to Sheldon Jordan, back in the room, founder of the Canadian Environmental Crime Research Network. Over to you, Sheldon.
So thank you and good afternoon. At the risk of repeating a little bit of what the previous speakers were talking about, I'm going to try to share with you an officer's perspective and why it would be valuable for them. So to give you context, I worked for more than 3 decades in law enforcement around the globe, both environmental and in other fields. And from the field level, where you have to get up very early in the morning and put on a whole bunch of stuff to hide yourself from poachers, all the way up to senior management, before recently moving on to civil society to keep on the good work. So start with a story. 13 years ago, I was the official responsible leading the Canadian government's wildlife enforcement program. One day I got a call from our Department of Justice, and they said they had something called the CCPCJ that I never heard of and couldn't tell it apart from basically any other acronym. And they were saying that there was a resolution being proposed on wildlife crime. They wanted to know what they should do with it. Since that day, if you look at the screen, by my count, there have been over 36 high-level policy resolutions and other declarations calling on governments to improve frameworks against environmental crime. I know I was involved in a lot of them. Today, I'm urging states parties to move from these policy statements and well-meaning resolutions to some more substantive decisions and some real action. There are many reasons to do this, but it all boils down to the fact that criminals are way far ahead of us, way far ahead of the transnational legal frameworks we have to take on transnational environmental crime, which is in turn holding back our law enforcement officers and our prosecutors. There are 4 reasons, in my opinion, for the UN to be acting now. First, legal frameworks are very fragmented. Environmental laws are usually different for every regulated sector. So think of wildlife, think of pollution, think of forestry, fisheries, mining. And they're often governed concurrently by national, subnational, and even local governments. There is most often no environmental crime policy or legal thread that ties the people responsible for the different environmental crime types together. This lack of coordination inside of states also complicates international collaboration. As a recent UNODC study found, which you'll see up there, while many crimes that affect the environment are criminalized in countries, few actually meet the threshold to be considered a serious crime, triggering the UNTOC. A protocol specifically authorizing transnational collaboration on crimes that affect the environment will help the officers by defining these crimes. We had a suggestion earlier. 2, and providing the UNTOC tools to frontline investigators and prosecutors across borders to get jobs done. Next slide, please. Second, click one more time. Second, bad guys do bad things. Whoops, went a little too far. Go back. Go back. One more. Perfect. Second, bad guys do bad things. Smugglers will smuggle, say that 5 times real fast. Ozone depleting substances and drugs. I've seen it. Corrupt officials will facilitate illegally harvested wood, just like they will accept bribes for other things. The profits from environmental crimes need to be laundered just like for other crimes. But right now, because of the scattered legal frameworks and environmental offenses not necessarily seen as predicate offenses for things like money laundering, the bad guys may be getting stopped for the green violations, but usually not for the profits that they're making. A protocol for crimes that affect the environment will not only help stop violations across borders, but also help police take on the corruption and the profits that often drive it. Click one more time for a new picture. There we go. This was at Interpol, the first major environmental crime conference a dozen years ago. I'm up on the right. Third, it's time for the UNTOC not only to catch up with the criminals, but also to catch up with the enforcement officials and the civil society folks who are already collaborating. If you think that enforcing transnational environmental crime is easy outside of an MLAT, boy, do I have news for you. If you don't have a multilateral legal assistance treaty that makes room for environmental crime, it is almost impossible, in my experience, to get transnational assistance. But like what I said, what is holding the good guys back is the lack of transnational legal frameworks to take their cooperation and turn it into convictions. So let me give you an example of already existing cooperation. Interpol, where I once worked, and I also chaired the Wildlife Crime Working Group for a number of years, Interpol has great capacity to help countries share information and convene them to cooperate. But Interpol does not have a mandate to touch evidence, cannot extradite suspects, cannot transfer exhibits between courts, because that is the responsibility of countries. By opening UNTOC's mechanisms on evidence exchange, as we've heard earlier, investigative support, special investigative techniques, extradition and prosecution collaboration for environmental crimes, especially where there isn't an MLAT already in place, which is by and large the majority of places, it will help fill the missing link between the information exchange that Interpol facilitates so well and the evidence exchange that only countries can do to put the bad guys in jail. This will make officers and prosecutors' jobs easier and make transnational criminals' lives more miserable than it already is. One more, good, perfect, stay there. Lastly, adopting a protocol will have state party signatories commit to reviewing and updating their laws. I've heard a lot about, countries should be encouraged to raise their penalties to UNTOC. I don't see a bunch of countries stampeding to do that. They don't have a reason to. Negotiating a protocol would give a reason for all of them to move in those directions, but it would be for the signatories, those who choose to do it. Simple fact. Transnational criminals have grown more sophisticated in all sectors. That's kind of why we're all here. Some may argue that it is too hard to do, that we would need to define which environmental crimes should count. I say that's not an obstacle. It's actually an opportunity to provide some clarity. Some say we already have multilateral environmental agreements that take care of this. We don't. Go ahead and read the multilateral environmental agreements and you will see that they are not about crime fighting. This isn't just your friendly environmental issue that we're advocating on. It's a damn hard crime issue that carries terrible governance, economic, and social impacts. So this is the last slide. Let's stitch it all together. 1, legal frameworks are currently disconnected internationally and often nationally. 2, bad guys do other crimes alongside environmental crime. 3, cooperation is happening, but officials are being held back by the inadequate transnational framework we currently have. And 4, give officers and prosecutors 21st century legal frameworks to take on 21st century crimes that affect the environment. This will be a good thing for officers and prosecutors and also for governments, the economy, and hey, maybe even ecosystems. So over the next months, I ask that you all think of the policy statement, 3 dozen plus, that and official resolutions and good wishes and nice thoughts that have been put out over the last decade or more. Policy leaders back home in your countries have already said that this is important 3 dozen times since I got that call from our Justice Department in 2013. So let's give our officers and prosecutors the legal tools they need so that transnational criminals committing crimes that affect the environment face the same consequences as they already do for other crime areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sheldon. And unbelievably, we seem to be slightly ahead of time. So I'm going to, in a minute, open the floor just for a very brief round of comments rather than questions, actually, because I don't think there'll be time to answer them. But I wanted to turn the floor first to Marcelo. We had a couple of points you wanted to respond on.
Yes, thank you so much, Ian. Well, first of all, I just wanted to, commend all the previous speakers, because I think that all of them contributed tremendously to the debate and to deepening our understanding of where we are right now in this process and where we need to go and how to proceed. There are 2 specific points that I would like to comment or react to, which I think are important for the reflection of all of us here today. The first one is the issue of definition of environmental crimes. I think this is a tremendously important point. As a matter of fact, since we started this discussion internally within the Brazilian government on the need to have a new protocol or new protocols in those days on this, we considered this the challenge of defining environmental crimes. We eventually came to the conclusion, and this was also later on a matter of discussion within the coalition of countries that are in favor of launching negotiations. But as a matter of fact, we should perhaps try to avoid that discussion. Because as most of you perhaps know, it is usually not very easy to define whatever you try to define, especially when it comes to multilateral negotiations. I've had my years as a negotiator and as a diplomat, and I tend to believe that that is perhaps one of the most difficult things to do. On the other hand, I think that in the particular case of a new protocol on what we in general terms call environmental crimes, perhaps that is not needed at this point in time. And the reason why I say that is that not long ago, actually quite recently, the international community, we ourselves, we managed to approve a resolution here first at the last CCPCJ, and later on, of course, in New York. And this resolution clearly indicates 4 modalities of whatever you can call environmental crimes. So my point is, actually, the international community has already agreed that there are 4 modalities of international crime that are there. The text of the resolution, it's resolution 80/227. It says, tackling illicit trafficking in wild fauna and flora, including timber and timber products, the illegal mining of and illicit trafficking in minerals and precious metals, and illicit trafficking in waste and other crimes that affect the environment. So there are what I call four, because I tend to separate wild trafficking and in terms of fauna and flora. You could also argue that it's only three modalities. Whatever. The thing is that the international community has already agreed upon those three modalities. So the draft resolution that we at the coalition are working on, we don't talk about launching negotiations on environmental crimes. We're talking about launching negotiations on these specific modalities that have been unanimously approved by the international community in this resolution. So that's the point. And my invitation is that we take a pragmatic approach on this, because otherwise I fear that perhaps we will remain discussing a possible definition of environmental crime for years and years to come, if not forever. Now, my second comment is that perhaps something that I should have better indicated in my initial statement, and I apologize for that, and I apologize for taking the floor again and taking your time. But perhaps I should have given a more slightly cautious, but slightly more positive view of what we in Brazil consider the state of the process at this point in time. What I mean to say is this. I think it's fair to say that we are observing a growing consensus that we need a new protocol. I think that's fair to say. We are in the middle of the way, it's true, but the dynamics are in such a way that support is growing. Now, as support grows, coming from different countries and in different levels of intensity, I think that this support and countries and people that support the idea of having a new protocol, they should also consider fully draw the consequent conclusions of supporting. What I mean to say is, and I put it perhaps a little bit bluntly, but very simply, three things, three words. First, commit, engage, and, if necessary, be prepared to vote at the next COP of the UNTOC. That's the point. Thank you.
Okay, we're almost at the time now, actually. So I will very quickly put up on the screen a set of recommendations in the spirit of what Marcelo just outlined from civil society. And just to summarize, based on everything you've heard, we're not going to go into details, but just to be clear from the civil society engaging on this topic, that's, our message to the member states, to states parties of the UNTOC in October, is that we want you to establish an ad hoc committee with mandate to negotiate a protocol crimes that affect the environment at conference in October. We don't think there will be another opportunity of this kind. We want to ensure that as part of that process, that ad hoc committee, many of us have been involved in other ad hoc committees where we've seen the value of civil society and private sector participation, for example, the UN Convention on Cybercrime being a recent example. So we want to ensure that civil society, and particularly in this case, including Indigenous peoples and local communities, are meaningfully included in the work. We want to ensure an ambitious scope covering all the relevant crimes that affect the environment within a kind of legally possible solution. And we also want to make sure that this doesn't mean that action stops and that pending the negotiation, that states parties are recommitting to fully implementing the UNTOC in addressing crimes that affect the environment, which I think is something everybody can agree on. So I will now pass to Carlos Sanchez del Aguila. It's the second time we've sat together already today, who was the chair of the Intergovernmental Expert Group, who's going to deliver closing remarks. We thank you, Carlos, for all the work that you've done over the years.
Thank you very much, Ian. And thanks for giving me the chance to deliver this closing remarks on this very important event. Excellencies, ambassadors from Brazil, Carolina, Goya, thanks for being here today. Dear colleagues, and especially one greeting to my dear friends, representative from the civil society. As we conclude the discussion, allow me to commend the Crime Alliance, as well as the other organizers and speakers for enlightening us today, bringing together a diverse range of perspective on an issue that has rapidly moved from the margins of the international environmental policy to the center of the global agenda of transnational organized crime. And we made this shift because of all of your work and your support. Today's exchange has confirmed what many member states have consistently highlighted during the work of the IEG. These crimes are no longer isolated environmental offenses. They have evolved into highly profitable criminal markets that are increasingly intertwined with corruption, money laundering, illicit financial flows, fraud, violence, and other forms of transnational organized crime. They undermine governance within the rule of law, deprive the state of public revenues, and threaten sustainable development. The discussions held within the IEG have produced several important conclusions. First, there is broad recognition that crimes that affect the environment constitute a serious and growing transnational threat requiring stronger international cooperation. Second, many delegations acknowledge the existence of gaps in the current international legal framework and identify a number of areas requiring further attention, including criminalization, international cooperation, investigation, financial inquiries, asset confiscation, and cross-border enforcement. Third, there was a widespread agreement that the UNTOC remains as an essential part of the solution, although its potential is not yet being fully utilized. While views continues to differ regarding the most appropriate path forward, the expert group demonstrates that the debate has evolved. The international community is no longer asking whether action is needed. It's discussing what form that action should take. The growing support expressed by many states for exploring additional responses under the UNTOC framework, including an additional protocol on crimes that affect the environment, reflects the growing awareness that the scale and sophistication of this typology of crime may require a more coherent and comprehensive international response. In this context, the contribution of civil society is indispensable. Civil society organizations have played a critical role in documenting criminal trends, supporting affected communities, strengthening accountability, and bringing forward innovative proposals. Their expertise enriches this process and helps us ensure that future responses are informed by evidence and operational realities. As we look ahead to the Crime Congress and the 13th session of the Conference of the Parties to the UNTOC, we have an opportunity to elevate this discussion from the technical level to a political one. Future generations will judge us not by the extent to which we diagnosed the problem, but by whether we were willing to act collectively to confront one of the fastest growing manifestations of transnational organized crime. The political momentum is building, dear colleagues. The evidence is on the table and is growing. The costs of inaction are becoming increasingly clear. The time has come to translating awareness into political will, and political will into meaningful multilateral action to address crimes that affect the environment. To finalize, dear colleagues, the task ahead is very complex, but we are ready to step forward in the front line of this battle for the environment. And I'm confident we will succeed in this enterprise in the next UNTOC COP with the support of member states and civil society organizations attached to this noble cause. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think the message is clear. Thank you very much, Carlos. Thank you very much to all the panelists, Marcelo, Ambassador. Thank you very much, and we look forward to continuing discussions throughout the week and to a successful UNTOC COP in October.